Hello, everyone, and welcome to 310 to Left, presented by your New England best-selling truck for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. I'm Tom Caron, alongside former Major League General Manager J.P. Ricciardi and Alex Speier, who's always here. We are just dusting off the cobwebs after an ugly night in Minnesota. A 90-minute rain delay coming in the middle of the ninth inning. And then Jordan Hicks comes on after warming up in the top of the ninth, an hour and a half off, came back out, and it did not go well. A couple of hit batters, loads the bases. While he did get an out, it was ultimately that two-run single down the left field line that cost the Red Sox the game. A tough loss for the Red Sox last night. JP, Alex, let's start there. We are so right now on the trade deadline roller coaster, the up and down, that a Sunday win over the Dodgers and you're ready to mortgage the future to win it all this year. A Monday night loss at Target Field and you're ready to blow it up and start over. Alex, you can start by being the voice of sanity. How should Red Sox fans have their panic meter set this morning?
I mean, if I'm the voice of sanity, then I'm not doing a very good job of holding anyone tethered to the mast. But I think there was nothing new that we saw yesterday that really changes the outlook on the Red Sox, right? Their back of the rotation seems like it's a weakness that needs reinforcement. Their bullpen seems like when you don't have Aroldis Chapman available, you have some issues getting through the late innings right now, particularly when it's not just Chapman, but also this very strange circumstance of Garrett Whitlock having been made unavailable by a terrible and bumpy flight. They need you. October is a bullpen month. You need a lot of bullpen arms. You need a lot of high-octane elite bullpen arms. Jordan Hicks has great stuff, one of the better arms in all of baseball, but the effectiveness is not consistent at the level where you would feel comfortable throwing him into those super high leverage spots. So I think panic? No, I think that this is a team that once again reinforced the idea that it's a pretty tough-minded group. And they were able to, you saw some impressive things with Bregman and Anthony being stabilizing lineup members in ways that we expected for Bregman that are absurd to expect for Roman Anthony at this stage of his career. JP knew it was happening. But I think this is a team that has a lot of strengths, that has some flaws. Everyone in the American League has some strengths and some flaws. So it's kind of a time of year to start addressing those flaws.
You know, Tom, just to hop on what Alex is saying, I think the good news is you look up, you still have a playoff spot today. The bad news is Texas is playing really well, and it's a very volatile, tentative hold on a playoff spot. So you know what's in front of you. Another starting pitching, another bullpen piece, even another bat would be a welcome addition to this lineup. But I look up, if I'm the GM, I'm sitting there saying, okay, right now we're in a playoff spot. Now what do we have to do to get better?
JP, we talk as fans and media members, we tend to go big picture. You're a buyer, you're a seller, that changes day to day, week to week, or it doesn't. As a GM, does like the level of concern in specific areas change in the short term? After last night, you look and say, wow, relief help is now a bigger priority than maybe I thought it was a few days ago. How much do those areas of need change in the weeks and days leading up to the deadline?
Well, I think the most important thing is, as the general manager, you know your team better than anybody else. So you know who in that bullpen you think is going to falter, who you think innings are going to catch up to, who, there's some underlying injuries or things that they're nursing that you know about. So you got to take that into consideration as you go forward. In a situation like the Red Sox, you're going to go for it because you're there right now. And you got to walk in that clubhouse and tell those guys, hey, I know the things that you're aware of, and I'm going to try to address those things. And they can do anything they want. They've got the resources to go big, to go middle, or to go low. They're sitting in a very enviable position where most teams in baseball don't have those resources to do those things.
Alex, I want to talk specifically about Jordan Hicks here because obviously you get him in that Devers deal, the one guy who's been on the big league roster from that Devers deal, a live arm. We know he's got the velocity. We know what he can throw. The batting average against him in low leverage situations is 194. The batting average against him in high leverage situations is 394. It's 200 points higher. He came in, and again, because of a number of reasons, right? You mentioned it, the Chapman day-to-day with the back spasms, Whitlock. I don't know if he was sick before the flight, but whatever the case, he is ill. And by the way, that flight was the real deal. Dave O'Brien said 35 years of professional flying, and this is a guy who flies, all winter long from college basketball games on a Saturday night to Fort Myers on a Sunday. He said it is hands down by far the worst flight he has ever been on. It was nasty talking to some people who were on that flight. And guys yesterday were still shaken up. Richard Fitz saying after the game last night, I still don't feel well from that flight. He, and this is the starting pitcher who didn't go out a day ahead because it was a day game at home. You go to Minnesota with the hour. There's no reason to, right? And how much you guys know, they got diverted, had to land in Michigan, then got up, and it was bad. Okay. So Chapman is out with a back spasm, Whitlock out with that. You have to go to Hicks. And on a follow-up question like last night, Alex Cora was very simple, slowing his words down, saying he was the last pitcher available. On no days rest this season, he has faced 8 batters. 2 have gotten hits, 2 have gotten walks, 2 have been hit by a pitch, and 1 was intentionally walked. He has recorded 1 out of the 8 batters he has faced with no days rest. So that was not a situation they wanted to be in to begin with last night. But it is a reminder, Alex, that while I think Jordan Hicks is a good addition to the bullpen, he's not a guy you're going to trust at the end of the game if you don't have Chapman. Do they need not just help in the bullpen, but end of the bullpen, back of the bullpen help?
I'm going to answer that in 2 ways. The first is not with actually an answer, but thinking about Hicks a little bit more. Let's not forget that he's been moved back. He's been shuttled between rotation and bullpen a little bit this year. He's also a guy who's been working through injury. So there's upside there, I think, that hasn't been achieved yet. You have a guy who's been shifting around his routines a lot, and so he's readjusting to the bullpen. And so maybe there's a better version of Jordan Hicks being able to work on back-to-back days somewhere down the road, but we're not there yet. He is a guy he comes in, and this is the second time in 3 outings that it was not just a little bit, but it was pretty extreme command difficulties, right? We saw the outing in Philadelphia that ended with catcher's interference, but he was all over the place in that situation as well. So I think that you're spot on, TC, that right now Jordan Hicks is a pitcher of potential impact, but not present impact. And so, yes, you're looking for present impact if you're the Red Sox right now. And their bullpen is actually setting up as a better group than I think probably a lot of us anticipated at this stage of the season, because Chapman has been spectacular as long as the back thing is just a minor blip. Garrett Whitlock has been tremendous in this single inning role. He's responded pretty well to being able to do back-to-back days as well, even though I don't think that you would probably see him 3 in a row anytime this season. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think that you have to limit the usage as he gets used to that shorter relief outing. Justin Wilson has been really, really good in that high leverage pocket against left-handed pitchers, but evidently, as Alex Cora made clear, was not available yesterday. He had pitched in back-to-back days against the Dodgers, but you have a really nice starting point. I think that, Weissert and Bernardino have gone through fluctuations this year that have been a function of how frequently they've been used. But yes, I think that the Red Sox need to be aiming reasonably high in terms of an additional arm somewhere along the way that can be the fallback option for Chapman and Whitlock. Because I think right now, Whitlock, you feel okay about him in the 9th inning if Chapman's not available. But you ride bullpens really hard in October and down the stretch, and so you need that third big arm.
And let's not forget, you rode them really hard in the first half of the season, right? Especially Weissert and Bernardino, who you talked about. Weissert's been really good the last couple of days, right? Got him out of the jam on Sunday. Was good last night when he came back in. I think Wilson had thrown 40 pitches over those previous 2 days, so he was completely down. Somebody's coming up from Worcester today. I don't know if anyone's heard who yet, but I assume Fitz is going down. And JP, that leads to that question, right? we all know, and we have known for a while, that the Red Sox could use help in the rotation. Richard Fitz, I think it's 3 1/3 he's averaging over the last 7 starts. So and there was a lot going on there with the 1 inning outing and the sent back down to try to stretch him out on the fly at the major league level. Didn't work. But he's been on a regular routine now for a couple of starts, and he hasn't been able to go deep. Happened again last night. Even getting through some innings, there were hard hit balls from the get-go. All 3 balls in the first inning, really hard hit right at people. So I guess the question, JP, is other than bringing Joe Ryan back, and I don't think anybody thinks Joe Ryan's hopping on that plane with the Red Sox. If you're the GM and you can't land the big fish, do you need a depth piece now, like what the Tigers did with Paddock? Just somebody to fill that 5th role. Are the Red Sox inching towards at least having to do that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways you can look at this. Externally, go out and get that guy that can be the 4th or 5th starter. Maybe it doesn't cost you as much. Maybe that's all that's available right now out there, barring the fact that you'd have to trade your entire farm system to land someone big. The other thought that I would have if I was sitting in the big seat is I would send Fitz down and let him become a 2-inning guy out of the bullpen. His stuff is good enough. I don't think he's a starter. I think he sells out for velocity. I think for some reason someone's push the velocity factor on him. And when I watch him pitch, he really gets outside his delivery at times because he's chasing velocity. But I think if you brought him down to AAA and let him just chase those 2 innings and maybe be able to bring him back as a 2-inning piece in the big leagues, that might be a way of addressing some of your needs. The other one I would have is when Houck comes back, maybe don't have Houck be your starter, maybe have Houck be a 1-inning guy and try to maximize what Houck's ability is at this point, because what I saw him earlier, he still looked like he was struggling to get deep into games. And, you got to almost look at what do I have in-house that can help me? And maybe those 2 guys in smaller pockets can be answers to some of your bigger problems in the pen. It's going to be tough to land a frontline guy. It's going to be so hard to land that 2 or 3 starter without really giving up a lot. And if you could give up a lot and get him, then I would say do it. But I just don't think they're available, and you probably get your eyes set on that 5th starter.
JP, along those lines, I guess it's worth asking. You've paid a lot of attention to the Woo Sox. You know what they have in their in terms of rotation options. Is there an internal option that you would put ahead of Fitz? Whether it's maybe a Cooper Criswell, a Kyle Harrison, a Tyler Ruberstein.
I think those guys at this point are not an addition to help you. I think they know Criswell. They've had him. They know what he is. He's more of a long guy, a guy that can bridge some innings for you when things aren't going great. I think Harrison is not ready for the big leagues right now. He doesn't command the ball enough. And once again, you start those guys, you bring them up here, and they give you 2 or 3 innings, and then you're into a bullpen game again. And then you get the shuttle going back and forth between Worcester and Boston. Who's healthy, who's ready, who needs time, who has options. So, at this stage of the season, you want to try to stay away from those short inning starts. So I don't really see a lot of help in AAA right now from a long-term standpoint. That's why I mentioned being a little bit creative with Fitz and a little bit creative with Houck. I think those are really your only options outside of going out and getting that 4th or 5th starter.
I should ask as a quick follow-up, do you see Walker, would you be comfortable with Walker Buehler based on what he's shown over his last few starts, making a playoff start?
I think he wouldn't be my first choice. I think you're going to struggle. He struggled all year. He is what he is, But what happens with those guys is ultimately if you get into a 7-game series, at one point they're going to have to take the ball for you. So if he's another guy, if you could push him to the pen at some point because of an addition you make, it may make your club better. But right now, I wouldn't feel that comfortable with him as one of my starters in the playoff spot.
All right, lots to talk about here, not just because what the Red Sox have done to earn their spot in this buyer's market or trying to become a buyer in the market, which is probably more accurate, but because nobody else in the American League is running away with anything. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about what the Red Sox might be willing to part with as we check out the farm system and more. Rolling on live here. It's 3:10 to left, presented by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. 310 to Left is presented by your New England Ford dealers who've been taking everyone out to the ball game at Fenway Park for decades. Catch Ford next time you're at Fenway, including in the Ford Clubhouse, a full-service bar perfect for bringing your lineup together and for recording our live edition of 310 to Left. It's all brought to you by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling trucks for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. And we welcome you back, rolling on live here, 310 to Left, presented by New England Ford dealers and F-Series, the best-selling truck in America for 48 years, and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. Tom Caron back with J.P. Ricciardi and Alex Speier, and we roll on. So, guys, let's dig into what they might be willing to do here. We thought there was a surplus of outfielders. We thought they might move a major league outfielder. Marcelo Mayer's injury apparently changes that, right? Rafaela slides over to second base. They don't call up Christian Campbell. They don't call up Vaughn Grissom. They call up David Hamilton. You saw why with the 2 stolen bases in the 9th inning last night. But Alex, as of right now, it certainly looks like they're going to stand pat. How significant is the Mayer injury? I know we don't really know anything, and it kind of feels the longer we don't hear anything, the more concerned we get.
Yeah, this feels, and JP probably has better insight into this. This feels like one of those situations where the Red Sox are waiting to say anything about season ending or duration of or timetable for return until, let's say, August 1st, after the trade deadline has come and gone, because you try to hold your cards a little bit. But and then there's usually a bunch of revelations right after the trade deadline of, yeah, he's not coming back. The fact that there hasn't been just a clear, yeah, this is a normal timetable for a return, makes it seem a little bit ominous. And of course, we do know that there's a history here of Marcelo Mayer having injuries that proved kind of thorny for him to return from down the stretch of the season, and including previous right wrist injury that he suffered while he was in his first full professional season in Salem. And that stuck with him over the course of a few weeks. So I don't know the specifics of the injury, but the fact that we don't know the specifics of the injury suggests to me that the Red Sox don't exactly think that it's a rush back for him. And certainly, I do think that we've arrived at a point where that notion of an outfield surplus is no longer in play. It would be almost impossible for me to imagine the Red Sox, for instance, trading Jarren Duran at this point for a few different reasons. One is that he's been basically their best player. We're right there with Roman Anthony since late June. Secondly, is the fact that they no longer have that surplus as long as Rafael is playing at second base. And third is that Jarren Duran is a huge part of their clubhouse culture, and I think that we saw them making a move that had a lot to do with clubhouse culture when they traded away Rafael Devers. So we know that they do prioritize that, and so it's hard for me to imagine that they would kind of tip over the apple cart in the middle of the season and deal someone who's one of their most important mentors for the young players who they have coming up, and who's a pretty beloved figure inside of the Red Sox clubhouse.
So I would play devil's advocate here a little bit, Alex. I think Duran is the one player you can trade that will bring you back what you absolutely need. He's the one guy people want. The other guys, you're not going to trade Anthony. You're probably not going to trade Abreu. But Duran, if you look at him, he's 27, 28 years old. He's controllable for 3 more years. I think Garcia is going to be a very good player in the big leagues for the Red Sox. You could put Anthony in center field. You could keep Abreu in right. You could keep Rafael at second. There's a lot of options I think that they have. I think Duran is the one, if you've got the guts to do it, he's the one piece that I think could bring something back. And really, if you want to address something, he's the one guy that people would crave, not only because of his talent, but more importantly, because of the controllable interest for 3 more years, I believe. So I think if the Red Sox are serious and you want to fire that one chip, he's the one guy that I would put out there.
All right, so let's go from there to devil's advocate to your devil's advocate. Let's say they don't do the Duran deal. Who could they move? You mentioned Garcia. Would they consider moving the password? Who are the prospects if you're not going to deal off the major league roster? Alex, we'll start with you. JP, you see him all the time in AAA. Alex, you cover all levels. What could you cobble together from your prospect list to go get a starting pitcher, the type of which could, be a game 2 or 3 starter in the playoffs?
Well, first of all, I don't know that there's not going to be that controllable guy who's available this year. I don't think. That's the only way, to JP's point, that you would consider moving Duran is in order to acquire that controllable guy who's going to be in the upper half of the rotation for years to come. I don't think the Twins are going to move Joe Ryan. You mentioned him getting on the plane. Why would he want to get on the plane to Boston after what we heard about yesterday's flight? But it feels like everyone is waiting on controllable starters in the same way that the White Sox did last year. Until the offseason they waited until the offseason with Crochet. So you're looking at more, at shorter term guys. And so that raises an interesting question because the Red Sox have chips. Garcia is an interesting chip. David Sandlin is an interesting chip. You have Peyton Tolley. I think that the Red Sox would be relatively reluctant to move him unless it was in a package involving a controllable starter. I think the same is true of Franklin Arias, Arias and Tolley, now that Anthony and Mayer have graduated from prospect status or are close to doing so, those are the 2 guys who are at the top of the system, along with Garcia. I think that those guys you only move in non-rental situations. Still, they have other guys who are interesting behind that. Brandon Clark is a guy who's a very high octane arm who has developed since being a 5th rounder in 2024 into a guy who's turning some heads, but he hasn't given a lot of innings this year in the minors. But he's interesting. Sandlin is someone who always registers on the radar of other teams. There's a question about whether or not he has a chance to be a starter or whether or not he's going to be a reliever. He has a chance to be a reliever for the Red Sox this year, I think. It's going to be really interesting to see the Red Sox usage of him now that he's being moved up to AAA. I think that the Red Sox, in a very unusual fashion, have a kind of interesting array of arms that they could consider moving. And then one position player that you might want to keep an eye on as a possibility to move is Miguel Blaze, who's a guy with as high a ceiling as they have in the system, 5-tool potential, explosive talent, but hasn't really been able to hit consistently in the lower minor leagues. And he's a guy who is going to be, who, if he's not added to the 40-man roster this offseason, is going to be subject to Rule 5, is going to be Rule 5 eligible. So that category of player, the potential Rule 5 eligible guy, is one that we've seen the Red Sox being very comfortable dealing.
JP, when you look at the pitching depth of this team, and you talked about Cooper Criswell, they know what he is. I think we would have seen more of him by now if they thought he could be a part of this. And when you've already dealt a Quinn Priester, And you see what Quinn Priester now is doing for the Milwaukee Brewers, right? 9-2 with a 3.28 at the moment. And again, it makes perfect sense. Alex and I have covered this. I bring him up almost every episode now, it feels like. But they dealt him because they had Fitz and they had Dobbins and they had Priester. He fit into that clump, right? That was a sort of surplus. Right. But when you see what he's been able to unlock in Milwaukee, does that make you less likely as a GM to move another minor league pitcher? When you get burned, do you pull back for a second and reevaluate your thought process?
Well, I think it definitely comes into your equation, but if you're afraid to deal, you're never going to deal. I think that's handcuffed a lot of GMs in Boston in the past. I always look at it this way. I really don't care who I'm giving up as long as I'm getting back what I want. And if what I get back doesn't add up to what I really wanted, then I made the mistake. Then that's on me. But if you get gun shy as a GM, and I think we live in a day and age right now in baseball where you're seeing less and less trades because so many guys are protective of their prospects. And that goes back to what Alex said earlier. If you put a package of Arias, Garcia, and Tolley on the board, you could get a pretty good pitcher. You could get a pretty good guy. And that's what I said at the beginning. The Red Sox have the resources to do a lot of things that a lot of clubs don't have. It's just how creative do they want to be? They have the wherewithal from whether it's a Duran, whoever you want to put. I know people don't want to hear this, but, even Rafael, you got guys that you can make some stuff happen. It just depends on, what your level of excitement is or detriment is as far as going forward to make the trade. But you definitely have the pieces.
I'm curious, JP, you are watching Christian Campbell in AAA. He got off to a rough start there. The strikeout rate was high initially. I think that he's been doing a lot of work in order to get his swing back, the one that made him the minor league player of the year last year. Where would he fall in your estimation in terms of with that? You have that long-term deal, right? Like if he's what you thought he was entering this year, that contract has the potential for hundreds of millions of dollars of surplus value. If he is not what you thought at the beginning of the year, then it's possible that is either a fair contract or one that's taking on water. How tradable is Christian Campbell, and what do you see from him in AAA? He's gotten better, by the way.
He has gotten better, but I think if you polled any organization right now and you asked them, would you take Christian Campbell? I don't think there'd be too many organizations that would sign up to take Christian Campbell. I think it's a byproduct more of the contract now as opposed to maybe what the player is. You got to hope it's not a Runzi Castillo deal. You got to hope it doesn't turn into that. I think Christian Campbell is going to be a good player. I think he really needs to start hitting the ball the other way. I think early in his career, he was dead pull. He bought into the dead pull and he got away with it, but he does not hit the ball to the right side. And I've always questioned what good hitter doesn't use the whole field. And if you're just a dead red middle in type hitter where your front hip flies open all the time, which his does, and you're looking pull, it's an easy guy to pitch to. So right now, I think he's struggling. He's in between as a hitter. And I think when he starts hitting the ball the other way and using all parts of the field, he'll get back to being more of a player that I think the Red Sox thought when they signed him. But right now, and if I just put myself in a scout, someone sent me out to evaluate, I would have a hard time saying that I would ask for this guy in a trade. So I think he's got some work to do to rebuild. And that's one of the challenges, when you bring a young kid to the big leagues. I think he's going to be fine. I think it's just going to take some time.
Yeah, there's another guy in Worcester I want to ask about. We're going to take a break. We'll come back and talk about a guy that they traded Chris Sale for, who suddenly found his way again. Vaughn Grissom is hitting in Worcester, but we have not heard him in the equation here at all. We'll talk about it with JP and Alex when we come back to this live edition of 310 to Left, presented by New England Ford Dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling truck for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. We'll be taking your questions on X, formerly Twitter, all that and more. Stay with us. And now we have audio. Welcome back to 310 to Left. Presented by your New England Ford dealers. We are live. Tom Caron, J.P. Ricciardi, Alex Speier with you tonight. The Woo Sox are back in action at Polar Park. Game will be on NESN Plus beginning at 6:30. J.P., are you doing the game tonight?
I am, yep.
Okay, so there you go. Vaughn Grissom has homered in each of the last 3 games. Since June 17th, he's hitting .324 with 19 extra base hits, 25 RBI. This is a guy you thought enough of to trade Chris Sale for him. Chris Sale went on to win the Cy Young. But at the moment, you didn't think enough of him to call him up when Marcelo Mayer was injured. Now, we understand why, and Alex Cora did a really good job explaining that at the moment. And again, you saw it last night. You got the go-ahead run because David Hamilton stole second and stole third. Elite speed that could have been the game-winning run, but wasn't. So where does Vaughn Grissom fit into all of this? He's been playing some first base. Could he be up with the Red Sox after the trade deadline in a second base or first base capacity? Does he have value in trade? What do we make of Vaughn Grissom, JP?
It's a really good question. This is a guy, the more you see him, the more he grows on you and the more you like him. If you go in and you look at a 1 or 2 game set, you may walk away and say, I'm not that impressed. But when you watch this kid play, he can play third, he can play short, he can play second, and now he can play first. He's almost an Abraham Toro comparison for me. He could do a lot of things to help your club, but I don't think he's an everyday player in the big leagues. I'll say this. He's got more arm than people think about. He's got a little bit more range than people think. And now this year he's coming into some power, which is the last thing that develops for any good player. Hits the ball the other way really, really well. I like his approach the other way. Stays on the ball well. And this year he's learning to pull the ball a little bit more, which is what you want to see from a young hitter. It's like Roman Anthony. The last thing that's going to come for him is to pull the ball. That's what good hitters do. So I would say Grissom is a pleasant surprise compared to Chris Sale, the trade. It's not fair to the kid to be kind of locked to that, but he's going to be something for the Red Sox. I think it's going to be more along the lines of a super utility guy. He gives you good at-bats. Will he be in the big leagues this year? I don't really see the fit because of the way the club's made up, but I could see him next year being a super utility guy with his team.
And I give him credit for the fact that he's, this has been a pretty discouraging year, right? Or easily could have been for someone who had come to Boston and thought, the second base job is going to be mine, right? It was supposed to be in 2024. Obviously, we know that a number of health woes ended up holding him back. And last year, he just physically wasn't ready to be he had to spend the entire year working his way back physically. That was an uphill battle, and he never got to the top of the hill. This year, he's been healthy, and you've seen him being willing and open to making those in-season adjustments. So first, kind of reestablishing some of that all-fields approach, and then getting to a point where he has been moving all over the infield in order to give himself further defensive value. And then finally, JP, I think you're nailing it with the Red Sox really wanted him to work on being able to drive the ball in the air and without sacrificing the overall hit tool, granted in AAA, which is that. It's not a great level this year, right? So there are some optical illusions that come along with great performance in AAA. But nonetheless, the way that he's hitting the ball now is very different than we've seen at any other point in his Red Sox tenure. And the fact that he's been willing to kind of keep his head down and keep developing, keep pushing to get better in the middle of kind of discouraging circumstances where he's been bypassed like 6,000 times for promotions, I give him credit for his maturity in handling a difficult situation.
Well, and JP, I'm glad you said a young player because I think people forget he's 24 years old. He'd be the second youngest position player on the active roster in Boston right now. He's younger than Cedar Rafaela, who we think of as a young player. I mean, it's really early to sort of make a decision on who Vaughn Grissom is going to be, right? There's still a future for this guy, and it could be with the Red Sox.
I think so. I think he's going to be a super utility guy. I could see him playing 20 games at first, 20 games at second, 20 games at short, 20 games at third, a couple of matchup DH. Cora does a great job with that. I mean, I could see him getting 100 games, kind of like the Gonzalez kid is, although, he could play on other sides of the part of the field, which brings a little bit more, a little bit more credence to what he can bring to the team. I'm not so sure he's a fit this year because of how the team is made up. But I could see them next year walking away from a few guys and saying, this guy's going to be our super utility guy. The other thing he does well that I failed to mention was his at-bats are good. He gets deep in counts. So you could pinch hit with him. You could, do different things with this guy that he's going to bring some credence to your lineup.
The one thing that's interesting, though, about the description that you're giving of who he is as a player, isn't that who Campbell is supposed to be for them, right? The guy who, because it doesn't seem like he's going to have it doesn't seem like there's a clear path for a single position, right? Like, I think there are two possibilities for Campbell's ultimate arrival in the Red Sox roster if he proves that he's worthy of that. And one of them at this point would seem to be first base. The other one would seem to be that super utility role. So from that vantage point, I do wonder whether or not that's going to position Grissom to be a guy who, if other teams are seeing JP what you're seeing, then maybe he's a guy who ends up being flipped at this deadline and kind of being one of those. He'd be kind of major league ready right now or close to it, even though you don't see that with the Red Sox, right? Like, so a team that needs position playing help right now and has a surplus of pitching. There may be a fit there.
Yeah, and I think, the low-hanging fruit here is Christian Campbell. It's easy to jump on him right now. He's not playing well. He was highly touted. He played great in April, and now he's not playing really well, and he's an easy target to pick on. And, my heart goes out to the kid because he's scuffling. You can see it on his body language, and he's battling. But, it's part of the maturation of a player. And right now, if you compare them both, Vaughn Grissom is a better player right now than Christian Campbell is. But that doesn't mean in the long run it's not going to play out the other way around. But I do think there's a place in a big league roster for Grissom, and I do believe that Grissom next year will be on the Red Sox roster.
Okay, Alex, you had an interesting little line buried there a couple moments ago where you said AAA is not a great level this year. You know what else is not a great level this year? The American League. It's kind of wide open. And I think that's why we're having some of these conversations, right? I mean, that 10-game winning streak has meant everything to this team. We know that, right? You take that out, and it's a completely different season. You can't take it out because they won those games. But since then, what are they now? 4-6 since the All-Star break. Nobody's really done anything except the Texas Rangers. Had the Rangers won last night, they would have jumped over the Red Sox for the final wild card spot. Cleveland, who knows how this is going to play out with the pending investigation and, multiple pitchers now with Class A suspended at the moment, obviously a non-disciplinary leave. But there's more to it, you would assume, and that's going to be hovering over that team. They're 4 games back right now. The Rays, I thought, were done. They beat the Yankees last night. They're creeping back in. How does this all play out? How many buyers are there right now? I'll let either one of you jump in on this. I mean, Texas, I assume Kansas City is going to act like they're still in this thing. But does Tampa Bay, I mean, they trade away Danny Jansen. They go get another catcher. You get the usual mixed signals out of Tampa Bay. How many teams are in this thing, and how many are going to act like they're in this thing over the next 48 hours?
I'll let you go, Alex.
See, nobody wants to answer
JP.
it. That's the way.
I mean, I think that at the very least, so I think Cleveland may be moved over to the sell window because without Class A, then their odds of being able to make up a ton of ground have shifted. So all of a sudden, you're seeing a lot more reports about teams that are making a harder push for Quan because they think that Cleveland is actually going to be in a position to trade him away. So I think that they're maybe the one team that's kind of more decisively had the abacus speed slide over in the last couple of days. I think the Rays have really been wrestling with the question of buy sell. I still think that it's hard to imagine them dealing someone like Yandy Diaz, who's one of the guys who has jumped up and not only accepted one contract extension with them, but 2 of them, and shown a great and abiding desire to be around and be a part of what they're doing. He is, for a couple of competitive cycles to come, he represents really a nice anchor for them, and I think that they would have to be blown away in order to consider dealing Diaz. Some of the major packages we're talking about, where it's the Arias Toley type caliber player. I don't know that the Red Sox are going to be willing to give up that much for a first baseman for the next couple of years. So I think that the Rays probably end up keeping Diaz and end up being the buy-sell dance, because I think this is a year where it's so hard to give up on contention. It is that flat playing field. The season that I kind of compare it to increasingly is one that happened 10 years ago, 2015. The Blue Jays were a sub 500 team immediately before the deadline. I think on July 27th or 28th of that year, they ended up trading for David Price and Troy Tulowitzki. Granted, talents that I don't think are accessible in this market, but they said, you know what? We're going to push in, despite the fact that we are a sub 500 team. In that landscape, remember, that was the year that the Royals won the World Series, was so flat. The Blue Jays went just zooming by everyone else in the American League East with a couple of upgrades. And I think that this is a market where you have an opportunity to make similar jumps in the standings by making small upgrades.
Yeah, to hop on that, I mean, you guys have been around a long time. Can you ever remember a time where the American League East has been this poor? I think you'd have to go back to the 70s, the early 70s, because it's been dominant. I've never seen, a non-dominant Red Sox team, a non-dominant Yankee team. There's usually 3 to 4 teams. I'm not even sure that the Blue Jays are going to win the division. There's still 2 months to go. I think it's all going to be pending on who makes a move. But when I look at the standings, Texas, they're going to go for it. They got DeGrom. They got those guys for a short window. I cannot see them not trying to do something. I think the surprise team to look out for is the Angels, because I think that they're looking at it like we haven't done anything in a while. We're as close to 500 as we ever been. Like you mentioned, Alex, it's a very winnable go-for-it division. I could see them doing something to kind of shake up the apple cart. I don't see Tampa. I think they're risk-averse. It has to be a win-win in their trades. I could see them trading Fairbanks and sliding some of their young kids in there. The Yankees, are going to go for it. They've already made minor moves, and sometimes those minor moves become major moves for them. So I think it's wide open, and that's why I look at the Red Sox. I really think a move here and a move there, and they're in the playoffs. And listen, you're supposed to play to win, right? And you got an opportunity to do it. You can't walk in that clubhouse and say, oh, well, we didn't feel like our time was right.
Yeah, not anymore, right? Like, it would be one thing if they had been before that 10-game winning streak, that would have been a different conversation. Now that they're holding on to one of the wild card spots and they've cemented themselves in a position where when the trade deadline comes and goes, they're going to be sitting there either in possession of one of those spots or just outside of it, to say that, that this wasn't a moment where we found reinforcements to be sufficiently valuable. That would send they're mindful of the messaging that they are delivering to a young core that they want to have as the standard. Always chase winning. Your goal is to be you're in Boston and you're supposed to chase championships in Boston. That's something that the front office needs to communicate successfully to this young culture of Red Sox players. It's something that they want to a message that is being offered by some of the veteran players like the Bregmans of the world, and that the front office, I think, and ownership is looking to share. I really think that the big question for them is just how far they're willing to turn the dial, what level of prospects they'll be willing to give up for rentals. As we had discussed to some degree last week, I found it surprising that the Red Sox, from my understanding, weren't very involved on Josh Naylor, who I thought was a guy who had a chance to upgrade their lineup in a really interesting way, given some of their struggles at first base. But it's going to be, to me, that's kind of the dividing line. Like, how much are you willing to give up for rentals? Is it going to be more than what you were willing to do last year for rentals?
Interesting stuff. I want to take a final break here, come back and sort of, talk about where it all ends up going. We'll get some predictions and what it would mean to this young team to make the playoffs, period. Whatever happened after that, you talk about a young group coming together, that next step. Let's talk about that when we come back. This live edition of 310 to Left, presented by New England Ford Dealers, continues right after this. 310 to Left is presented by your New England Ford dealers, who've been taking everyone out to the ball game at Fenway Park for decades. Catch Ford next time you're at Fenway, including in the Ford Clubhouse, a full-service bar perfect for bringing your lineup together and for recording our live edition of 310 to Left. It's all brought to you by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling trucks for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. We are back. It is a live edition of 310 to Left. We've got some questions coming in on Twitter. Want to get to that X, whatever it's called. Want to get to that in a few minutes. But first, real quickly, and some quick answers on this, guys. I'm just curious. JP, starting with you. I've heard a few people say, well, they're not going to win the World Series. National League's too good. What does it matter if they make the playoffs? When you've got a young group coming together, how important is that step? Making a playoff, checking it off, even if you don't go deep in the playoffs. To me, that always feels like that's an important step in the evolution of a young team. Is that true?
Well, first of all, how do you know you won't? I mean, Arizona went to the World Series with 83 wins. In 2015, we went to the World Series. We were 3 games under 500. We made a trade for Cespedes. We went to the World Series. We got hot. I think if you're in the prediction of when you're going to win and when you're going to lose, you're never really going to have a go for it attitude. So to me, you can't get there unless you get in. So I would disagree with that. And any experience is great experience, especially for those young kids.
And Alex, I want to ask you. I want to ask you because you mentioned culture. Yeah, you mentioned culture before, right? Wasn't that part of the Devers trade? Like, is it, the whole idea is they're trying to build a certain culture. Playoff expectations, as you mentioned, Alex, is part of that culture.
Yeah, Tom, you and I talked about it with Craig Breslow right before when we met with him right before the All-Star break, and he said that's a standard that they're trying to introduce and uphold for the young players who are getting used to playing in Boston. The standard in Boston is supposed to be pursuing championships and playing at that level. And Alex Cora talked about the importance of this 9-game stretch that they just concluded against the Cubs, against the Phillies, against the Dodgers, which was electric. Like the atmospheres in all 3 of those parks was different than what those guys had experienced before, and really, in many ways had an the way that Roman Anthony is responding to this is meaningful for not just the present but potentially the future of the Red Sox. And so, yes, absolutely, I'm a believer in stepping stone moments. There are stepping stone moments for organizations to build. You saw it with the 2016-2017 postseasons for the Red Sox, leading to the 2018 breakthrough. I mentioned the 2015 Royals earlier. They had the obvious 2-year period of 2014 into 2015. So yes, I think that those learning experiences do matter.
Young players need to learn how to handle champagne spray in the eye, and the sooner they learn that, the better. We've got questions here on X. Let's start. JJ is our first one. JJ8JJJS. How much pressure is there from ownership to make big moves at the deadline, or willingness from Breslow, given that they sat out on Naylor, who seemed like a good fit? Seems like there's been reports saying they're going to be aggressive and others saying they may stand pat. Alex, you start here. How much pressure on Greg Breslow to do something? Where does ownership stand, do you think?
I think that they're clearly supportive of the of moves to upgrade the 2025 opportunities, but I do think that they're going to be that they like their baseball operations people to make baseball operations to make baseball decisions, and so I think that if I think that there's a sense of wanting a clear mission of upgrading for 2025, but I think that they're open-minded to the idea of. I think it's a conversation that's going to continue strategically between ownership and Craig Breslow about the rental question that I highlighted just before the break.
JP, you've been through this as a GM, that whole concept of being sustainable, which is what the Red Sox have said they want. They want a model that is contending every year and a sustainable model. But there's a balance between the sustainability of the future and going for it this year. As a GM, how do you sell ownership on, we're not blowing the whole thing up, but man, we got a chance to do something right now?
Well, I think the directive comes from ownership. I mean, they're the ones who have to support it and back it. And if there's guardrails on you as to what you can do, then you're only going to be able to make certain types of moves. The big question is, is the drive as heavy as it was in 04 and 05 and 06 and 07 when, man, I competed against those guys, and the Red Sox were so tough and hard to beat, and they always would turn. You threw one card, they threw 2 cards. So I don't know if those training wheels are off now. I think they're back on to the point where they want to have a little bit more of a controllable environment. So, it comes from ownership, and ownership has to be the one that blesses the moves.
All right, let's go back to X. Ollie B, Ollie 0099 writes in, what are the benefits of waiting out the deadline before making a move or being one of the earlier teams that get going after players? So, JP, what's the advantage of going in right now versus maybe waiting till Thursday at noon?
Well, I think the advantage is even if you went a couple of weeks before, you have the player for an entire month. And there's a couple of things to look at. One, he could come in and give you a jump start, which is a big plus to have. The second thing is if you have him in early July and you don't like what's happening, you could spin him somewhere else. So there's no downside to having a good player come into your organization and try to start the winning as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think that there's. I talked to Dave Dombrowski about this last week in Philadelphia after he had signed David Robertson, and he said, "Look, I don't know that the player that I want is going to be available right at the deadline. If I have a bird in hand and I like the player that I can get back, then there is huge benefit to that, and it permits more freedom with the rest of deadline moves." But I think to Ollie's question, I think that the reality is that teams don't always show their hands about who is actually going to be available until the 48 hours or so at the deadline. So the argument for waiting is that prices drop closer to the deadline, right? JP, you've lived that. Is that really true? Like how drastically, or like how much do offers change over those last 24, 48 hours before the deadline?
Well, they definitely change, but I guess the question I would ask you guys have been in the game a long time. Have you ever seen a more quiet trading deadline? I mean, it's Thursday. You're only 2 days away, in a matter of hours, and I mean, there's not a lot happening. So that's a little alarming.
Isn't that a little bit of a byproduct of everyone kind of models out the same value for the most part now, right? I mean, Devers trade, right? The Devers trade was kind of a bold move. Buster Moldy, and hasn't worked out great for the Giants, at least not yet. If anything, that might have scared some people away from making that kind of move.
Well, the game today is filled with people that are so protective of their resources, and they won't get outside that comfort zone. But what they don't realize is you're ultimately going to be extended or fired based on what your team does. And if you don't try to do some things, you may just be stuck in that little rut and you never get outside it. But I mean, to me, to be aggressive is the best way to go. And I was blessed. I mean, in Oakland, we were aggressive. In Toronto, we were aggressive. In the Mets, we were aggressive. So, I mean, I just believe in going for it any chance you get. It's the best thing you can do is walk in that clubhouse and tell those guys you got players coming.
All right, let's get one more here. Corey Bruce, see Bruce photo as saying everyone's talking about big names like Joe Ryan, but is there an under-the-radar player you think the Red Sox could realistically target at the deadline? Someone not getting much attention, but who could make a real impact down the stretch. Alex, you got someone in mind?
I mean, there are plenty of them. I think that there are, and it's not even under the radar. I think that, when you hear names like Merrill Kelly, when you hear names like potentially Zach Gallen, depending on how much of a sale the Diamondbacks are willing to commit to, even a Charlie Morton, who is an experienced playoff performer who's been pitching very well over the last couple of months. I think that would move the needle. Then you have the controllable guys. The Pirates are in a position where they're going to have to move some of their guys. And Mitch Keller, it would be an interesting stabilizing guy, not just for now, but into the future. If you're the Red Sox, you're going to have to be making some rotation moves this offseason. You can get a jump on that. So I think there are plenty of guys who have an opportunity. The idea is the goal is get better. Get better if you're the Red Sox. You have some deficiencies, you can address them and put yourself in a really good position relative to the rest of the division and the American League.
All right, I got a final question for each of you. We got about a minute left, so you get about 20 seconds for each of these. JP, I want you to start. You talked about several times in this hour what it means to come in the clubhouse and say we got this guy and this guy. What does it mean to a clubhouse if you don't? We've talked about this so many times over the year. Is there a cooling effect on a team that thinks it's in it and you don't make a move to bolster their chances?
That's when the GMs don't go in the clubhouse. I just think, they look at you as you're part of the team. This is how I can help the team. If I walk in there with no one, they kind of sit there and you can feel the air come out of the room.
I think that Alex, we got 20 seconds. I want to get my last question to you. Where do they improve? Give me a position. I don't need a name. What do the Red Sox get before 6 o'clock Thursday? Where is it?
Both bullpen and starting pitching. I think it's going to happen.
There you go. Simple as that. Quick question, quick answer, and we wrap it up quickly. Guys, it was fun. We're going to do it again Thursday morning. Then we will be in studio Thursday at 5 o'clock for our annual trade deadline special with J.P. Ricciardi and Alex Speier. I'm Tom Caron. Thanks for watching 310 to Left.